More similarities and differences between baseball and cricket.
Hey, this video is a follow-up to my video, Cricket Explained for Baseball Fans. If you haven't watched that one, you might want to do that first. For the final section of that video, I described some broad similarities and differences between cricket and baseball. Several people shared more similarities and differences in the comment section of that video, so I figured it would be a good idea to make a quick companion video highlighting some additional ones. One difference, and this is pretty obvious, but it bears a mention, is that in cricket, the fielders catch the ball with their bare hands, while baseball players use gloves. It should be noted that the cricket ball is actually heavier and harder than a baseball, so that's just something to know. While we're here, let's talk about the balls. Although they look different, cricket balls and baseballs are actually pretty similar. They're both made of cork and string covered in leather and are stitched together along standard seams. Cricket balls have a single seam that goes around the equator of the ball as opposed to the horseshoe-shaped seam of a baseball. The main difference is that cricket balls are heavier and slightly smaller than baseballs and are considerably harder because they're covered in lacquer. A major difference is that in cricket, each ball is used for a much longer amount of time than in baseball. How long each ball is used depends on the format of cricket and a few other factors, but it's significantly longer than in baseball, where a new ball is provided anytime the pitcher wants one, anytime the umpire determines that a ball has become dirty, or anytime the ball goes into the seats. Over 100 balls might be used in a single Major League Baseball game, whereas as few as 4 or even just 2 balls might be used across a cricket match, depending on the format and details. Unlike baseball, where fans can keep the balls that they catch, if the cricket ball is hit into the stands, it is returned to play. And if it becomes lost or damaged, the umpire selects a new ball from a collection of game-worn balls and will choose the ball that is the most similarly worn to the one that was in play. One similarity is that both games have a bit of a ritual break built into them, at least at the highest levels. Professional baseball has its 7th inning stretch, whereas one-day international cricket and test cricket have tea and lunch or dinner breaks. The difference is that baseball's 7th inning stretch always happens halfway through the 7th inning, while the tea and dinner or lunch breaks in cricket happen at set times during the playing day, regardless of where they are in the match. Also, the breaks in these cricket matches are considerably longer than the 7th inning stretch, which only lasts a few minutes. YouTube user SynthMusicFan501 brought up a bunch of similarities and differences, and they have created a series of videos about cricket that explain the game in more detail for anybody interested. One difference that was new to me is that in cricket, there are no double plays. Only one runner or batter can be put out in a single play. YouTube user Era Persigan2 brought up a similar difference, which is in cricket, there's no need to tag up like on a fly ball that might be caught. If the ball was caught, as long as you made it past the other crease, you're safe. The run won't count, but this is something that you might want to do to affect the striking position for the next ball. Another difference brought up by YouTube user Sam Moffat is that a lot of the decisions that in baseball would be made by the manager, in cricket are made by the on-field captain, so someone who's actually playing the game. It's been a long time since Major League Baseball has seen a player manager, and it's pretty rare for on-field players to have, the level of influence over decision-making that a manager has, although it does happen sometimes. A similarity between the two games is that bowlers and pitchers deliver the ball at different speeds and with different types of spin, and each type of delivery has its own name. For example, in baseball, we have the changeup, and in cricket, there is the slower ball. One difference that I've noticed, and I would love for a cricket person to maybe explain this a little bit better in the comments, is that cricket bowlers tend to be identified or classified based on the type of bowling that they do. There are 2 broad categories. You have fast bowlers and spin bowlers, and within those categories, you have bowlers who are identified with one sub-style of bowling. In baseball, it's not uncommon for a pitcher to have a signature pitch or a signature sequence of pitches, but these are generally seen as just one part of a wider pitching arsenal. It's rare for a baseball pitcher to be identified primarily by the type of pitch that they throw. Knuckleballers are the one exception I can think of right now. Like R.A. Dickey, you would call him a knuckleballer before you'd call him anything else. Instead, in baseball, it's much more common to identify or classify a pitcher by the role they play on the team. Starter, closer, setup man, long reliever, etc. I mean, even someone like Mariano Rivera, who was known for basically throwing only one style of pitch, you wouldn't call him a cutter ball pitcher before you called him the closer for the New York Yankees. Another similarity between the two games is that baseball and limited overs cricket deal with ties basically the same way. In baseball, if the game is tied after the 9th inning, they go on to extra innings, which is where additional innings are played until one team has scored more runs than the other team at the end of the inning. And in limited overs cricket, if the game is tied after the overs limit has been reached after the second innings, they play what are called super overs, which is where each team bats for 1 over, and they keep doing this until the super over ends with one team having more runs than the other team, just like in extra innings. And a thank you goes out to YouTube user Sankara Narayanan C for pointing this out. Finally, in baseball, if weather causes the game to be shut down for the day, the game is either declared final as it is, or the game is suspended and basically unpaused at a later date, depending on how much of the game has been completed. This can lead to some interesting situations, including at least one case where a player appeared for both teams in the same game after being dropped by one team and then picked up by the other team in between the suspension of the game and its restarting a few months later. In limited overs cricket, if weather causes the game to be shut down and it's still the first innings, the match is just considered a draw. They don't restart the match at another date. If this happens during the second innings and the batting team has had the opportunity to bat at least 20 overs if it's an ODI cricket match or 5 overs if it's a T20 match, one team is declared the winner, but it's not necessarily the team with the most runs. They use something called the Duckworth-Lewis method to determine the winner. And this is way too complicated for me to talk about here, so there's a link in the description if you want more information about this. Before we end this video, I just wanted to weigh in on a debate that seems to have come up in the comment section of that video just in the last week or so. And the debate is about which of these games is more complicated. And I want to preface what I'm about to say by saying, I'm a lifelong baseball fan. I played Little League as a kid. I play weekly pickup games in the park. I run a fantasy baseball league. I watch at least one baseball game a day during baseball season. And I'm pretty new to cricket. I only really got into cricket maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and it was a conscious thing. I decided I wanted to get into it. It seemed interesting, so I started watching some matches and basically had to figure the game out myself. With all this being said, I can confidently say that if you are starting from a place where you know nothing about either sport, cricket is by far the easier game to understand. My oldest kid is 3 years old. And most of her cousins and the kids that she plays with are, her age or at most kindergarten age. And we've tried playing games like t-ball and kickball using baseball rules. And we've also played a game that's basically cricket, but, modified for a 3 or 4-year-old. And just at this basic gameplay level, I find that cricket is just so much easier to describe to a 3 to 5-year-old, which makes me think that it's probably the simpler game to understand if you're coming at it from a position of not knowing either sport. I mean, in cricket, you can hit the ball in any direction. There's no foul area, so you don't have to explain that. There's only the 2 wickets. There's not the 4 bases. So you just tell the kid, try to hit the ball, and if you think you can make it to the other wicket, run. If you don't think you can make it, stay put. That's honestly a lot easier than, okay, so you hit the ball, run to first base. You have to run to first base, but don't run to second unless you think you can make it. Unless you're compelled to run to second because you started on first base and now the ball is in place, so you're compelled to move. It's a lot more complicated. There's no tagging up in cricket, so you don't have to teach the kids about, okay, so if they catch the ball, you actually have to tag up on the base that you were at, and then if you think you can make it, you can run, but a lot of the time you don't want to run, unless there's 2 outs and 2 strikes, in which case you do want to run. That's a lot more information than just, if you think you can make it, try to run to the other one. Now, this is not to say that cricket does not have its complexities, right? Both games have their own intricacies and complexities and the little details and the fine print that make them, not the easiest games in the world to explain. But even then, I find that cricket's rules follow an internal logic at least a bit more closely than baseball. A great example of baseball not necessarily following its own internal logic is the dropped third strike, which is something that's been brought up in the comments. So for those of you who don't know, in baseball, if a batter swings at a pitch and misses, it's a strike. It's a strike if the ball comes in cleanly. It's a strike if the ball hits the dirt first, which happens a lot on splitters or with back foot sliders or something like that. Even if the catcher is unable to cleanly get possession of the ball, it's still a strike. However, the batter is only out after the third strike if the catcher catches the ball in the air. So if the ball bounces first, or if the catcher cannot cleanly handle the ball and the batter swings, it's still a strike. It still counts as a strikeout for the pitcher and for the batter, but the batter's not actually out. The batter is actually a runner, as if the ball had been put in play. That makes sense if you know that the putout only happens when the catcher catches the ball. But that's not something you would know automatically, especially knowing that a batter can't just run to first base on a wild pitch or a passed ball otherwise. But even then, this does not apply to every single dropped third strike situation. It only applies if first base is unoccupied or if there are two outs. You really wouldn't be able to intuit that rule based on the other rules of baseball that you know. I find there's less of that in cricket. Anyway, if you're a person who knows both sports, feel free to disagree with me in the comments, but that's just something I wanted to weigh in on. Maybe, at least for some of us, the reason why cricket seems so confusing or overwhelming is because there are just enough similarities to baseball that we kind of get into a baseball mindset when we watch the game. And this makes the differences between baseball and cricket seem especially weird or even chaotic, right? Like imagine two batters just running back and forth between home plate and the pitcher's mound. That would be absolute chaos. But again, if you're starting at a place where you know neither game, I think cricket is the easier game to describe to you and for you to understand, and I don't think it's close. All right, that's it for now. If you'd like more similarities and differences between baseball and cricket, you can check out my Cricket Explained for Baseball Fans video on your screen. There's a bunch in that video, and then there's a lot in the comment section.